Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's Fateless podcast episode. Joining me from the Fateless team is going to be Simon, aka Hellhades, and then our special guest for this episode is going to be MadCapper, one of my longest standing friends in the mobile community, one of the first people to join my original Chofly clan. What is up, Capper? Good to see you.
And actually turns out one of my mortal enemies that I will not collab with. No.
Yeah. It's been, I just got you get those little things from YouTube, and it just told me it was my 5-year anniversary about a week ago for YouTube. So that's and that would have been within that month is when I joined Showfly. So in 5 years, two things are true. Brad and I have played a lot of games together, tried a lot of different things, and Simon and I have never collabed because he avoids me like I have a disease or something, which I understand. I'm just saying it's been an avoidance for 5 years. So here we are. I have you trapped.
I'm horrendous. Like, unless someone kind of badgers me, and I'm terrible at reaching out for a collab. And then unless someone is like, look, let's do this, and then we lock it in, I'm horrendous at it. Because in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, that's going to add quite a lot of time to my day.
Yes.
I know some people are just like, they go after a collab. I'm like, oh man, I'm terrible at it. So apologies. Apologies.
Yeah. Well, and I'm terrible at it too. So that's why it was actually a meme on Twitch. I'm not going to lie to you. It was a meme because I'd see you were on and I'd be starting. And at the time I was actually pulling decent numbers in the 70, 80s. Cool. And I'd be like, what are the chances? I go, what are the chances he's gonna raid me? It's 0. It's not going to happen. And all my group would, they bet and they'd say, we'll give you 5 subs if he and you never would. You never would.
Did I never raid you?
No, you did a few times, but it was like it became a meme. Yeah, we had a lot of fun with it. I'm like, I mean, whoever it is, you'd raid like Ivy or someone, and then they'd raid me anyway. But it was kind of funny that play that game.
Heck yeah! Well, what have you been up to, Capper? I know, for the viewers, Capper was a long time raid creator. And then are you still doing raid, or what are you playing nowadays, or what's the gaming life look like?
Yeah, I quit raid about 6 months ago, I would say. I kind of had enough. So there's a couple things. First of all, my day job, I work for a retail pharmacy group. I'm like an area manager for them. That's a lot of time. There's a lot of travel. And for those who play raid, it's not a quick 45-minute a day life. It's especially
not casual, no.
It's like 2.5, 3 hours. So I had to make the decision. And of course, raid gives you enough opportunities to make that decision with all of the things that they do. So finally I was just like, you know what? I'm done. It's over. HWZ actually plays my account. He's keeping it current.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, our clan's very competitive and I have a good account. Like I have a strong account. So he's been playing it to make sure the Hydra and all the challenges we have a strong account. He keeps asking me to return because he's getting burned out. I'm like, no, it's too bad. Yeah. You made it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I do play Watcher Realm. I do try to make content for that game. I also just literally I'm going to be dropping my first look at King Arthur, which is looking pretty good. So I'll have that on the main channel. That is just kind of been GODFORGE and used to be raid, and it's just random stuff now. And then I do a travel channel. So I got married in October. And for the last 2 years, we've been going on cruises and different stuff and trying to connect because she's American. So it makes it a little bit difficult to connect sometimes. But we're doing a kind of a collaboration. We used to do summon videos together, and those used to be just banger videos. And everyone's like, oh, you guys have great chemistry and stuff. So we're like, well, why don't we do something for us? And that's kind of how that came. So that's where I'm at. And then I restarted up Cyberpunk. So I've been playing that on the Xbox Series X or whatever, the new Xbox 5, whatever you want to call that one. So that's been fun too.
I was just curious, like, what drew you into Watcher of Realms? Obviously, with GODFORGE, we're trying to create a game that personally attracts players that love this genre, but then also when they are playing the game, they want to stay around. There's two key things really. What's got you into Watcher of Realms in the first place, and then what's kind of made you stick with that one?
So Nick, who's a regular of mine, he watches all my content. He was always in my streams. He was playing it and he kept badgering me to play it. That's how this happens. Badger. And finally I said, you know what? I'll give it a go. I mean, I think it was you and Ash had already moved
Yeah, I was
over
playing
for
it quite
about
heavily. Yeah.
a couple months, I would say, at the time I did. I just got my 1 year there too. So, but I like tower defense, and it'd been a while since I'd played that style. I mean, I was kind of looking forward to Incarnate, and unfortunately, that didn't come to pass. But so this was kind of filling that void, and it'd been a long time. So I was like, fine, I'll play it. The graphics were at the level of expectation. I would say probably if you put them side by side, is Raid better? I think probably the character models are a little bit sharp, but these guys certainly are in that conversation, which is helpful. The thing I love about this the most is once you figure it out, you're good. And so the time sink is if I don't have time, 30 minutes I can do my dailies. And when I do have time, I can spend 2 hours, I can make a video and stuff like that. And I think the real appeal is that it's on my decision as to how much I play. Can I play for 2-3 hours? Yes. Awesome. Can I play for 45? Yes. And I think that's the biggest thing that Raid was missing, and I think that's the biggest draw to Watcher of Realms.
Yeah. I wonder if Raid have almost grown. Well, they've grown very wide in terms of like depth of content, and they haven't really given people that ability to streamline some of the old stuff that well. So, obviously, Raid's now an old game. It's like 6 years old, near enough, and there's tons of content in that game. Like lots of fun content on this. It's a brilliantly crafted game, but I think when you've got something like I really enjoyed Watcher of Realms when I came in. In fact, the thing for me is I found the first 2 hours playing the game actually kind of dull. I was like, I'm not sure if I'm going to enjoy this game. And I was doing initially a couple of video sponsor on it. So I was like, well, I'm going to play it through and see what I think. But actually, once I got past that initial phase, I love tower defense as well. And I really enjoyed the concept of the game and the kind of like different version of something which already felt kind of familiar to me. And yeah, I think they did a good job. But it's funny that initial 2 hours, like if I was not kind of like compelled to play it for longer, I probably would have stopped playing. So I just felt like it was so slow paced, and I didn't really feel like I was getting, the ability to do what I wanted to do for such a long period of time. The tutorial was just dragging for me.
Absolutely. I think the problem I found with Watchers is that, and I think Raid gets a lot of crap for this, but I think they do an amazing job, is that first campaign. First off, it takes you 15 minutes to get through the tutorial, 10 minutes maybe. I mean, we've all had sponsorship. We all know that cycle game. But then you can go in and you play the campaign, and they give you a story each chapter. Whereas with Watcher, and I say it's been a while, but I seem to recall it was like after each level, and it felt like stop talking to me and let me play
stop
and get
forcing
involved.
me to do this way.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's funny because we're kind of going through our very early game, our tutorial and first time user experience right now. We're building it out, and we're testing different elements of it. And we had someone actually join the team recently who's done a lot of early game experience stuff and also has built like economies for games. And funny, he came in and was just kind of like, look, we need to rip out a whole bunch of the stuff we're trying to force people to do and just allow people to almost make a mistake or struggle. And the element where they're struggling is then telling them, actually, this is what you could do to improve. So rather than, I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you how to put a piece of gear on someone. I'm going to make you level it up to level 2. I'm going to take you here. It's actually like, no, when someone fails or looks like they're going to fail because their level is so low compared to the content, it's like, now redirect so that it's not all up front when it's meaningless to them. And they're just trying to kind of smash through it as quickly as they can. So it's quite an interesting, different way of thinking, I think, compared to what we've seen so far.
Well, and I think maybe not so much in the gacha, but I think in the AAA gaming, allowing yourself to fail is a staple of playing the game. Like I'm thinking even Starfield, which mixed reviews. I love it. I don't know why everyone hates it. But that beginning, your beginning is you mine a piece of thing, and then it's like, oh, now there's a firefight. Now you got to learn how to grab that gun over there, and then you got to grab it and you got to start shooting the enemy, and it doesn't hold your hand through that. And even Cyberpunk holds your hand more, and I'm now just replaying that. I'm like, stop holding my hand. let me
Yeah,
just shoot
yeah.
that guy because I know he's red. I want to shoot him.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're right. Yeah, just
Well, but
allowing
I think
people
we're
to
so
fail.
fearful as the game dev. You know, I was absolutely up for like, I don't feel like we need much of a tutorial at all. And then got other people in the team, and they're sort of saying, well, what if someone's never played this type of game before, and you're fearful that they're just going to leave because they can't understand that hitting battle is going to take you into like stupid stuff, which is just completely natural for anyone who's played any sort of game to do. That's the direction you're going to go, but we're forcing it because we're scared that someone's going to miss it. And if 5% of people need that direction, it shouldn't encroach on the 95% of people that actually understand the basics of playing a game. So it's a funny thing when you're in this type of game dev environment, and you're like start to second guess, is this actually the right way?
Yeah. I can't imagine being in your guys' shoes and trying to figure out what, like, with every turn, because you can second. I played the tutorial in the beginning of King Arthur, and it was funny because they slowly unlock these areas and then tell you about them. And I found that Amanda and I were playing together, my wife, and I'm like, I just want to do summons. It's for a video. And they kept, no, you got to go here. I'm like, stop it. Don't, just let me get to there. I was like, I probably would have even spent a little money for the sake of the video, but I kept getting redirected everywhere. So I was like, nah, you know what? I'll just play it this far and we'll see where we go. But it's an interesting.
Yeah, that's it's also getting that first hour, and I would want to get your perspective. You've tried a lot of games, and why Raid was able to hook you at a certain level, and get you to really like, oh, this is a game I want to play for 5 years, and why, and like I can only speak for me. I usually know the answer to that with literally in like under an hour. Like I try a game, and in under an hour I can tell you this has it. Like I'm ready to dive in. I try V Rising, and in 30 minutes, I'm like, this is awesome. I'm gonna beat this game. I try Raid. 30 minutes in, I'm like, whoa, like this is fun. I'm gonna dive in and invest in this. And then you play some games, we've all done it, where you're like, I'm just not feeling it. What, from your perspective, Capper, what would be like that first hour? How do we get people to feel like, damn, GODFORGE is something here?
Well, I mean, I'll run through the games that really hooked me early. There's some games you got to slice through to get through, and then once you get through, like, oh my god, this is actually, I'm glad I took the time. But you don't necessarily want that. And I think, like, and spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't played The Last of Us, but it's been like 8 years, so that's your fault. That beginning where it has nothing to do with the game. I mean, other than, you're just carrying your daughter around, you're trying to get her through. And that you have that wow moment when the daughter dies. And you're just like, did this just happen to me? And you're pissed off and you're angry. And that just set you in the moment. They're like, oh yeah, I'm going to play this game. I want retribution. And you think it's fun. And that was a big wow moment for me. I remember with that game, it was just something different. And I remember with Assassin's Creed, which is a game that I played 1 through, I haven't played the last one because they're not really what they used to be anymore. But that moment when you're like, hold on, I'm assassinating people from a build, I'm climbing through, but it was something wow. So I think one of the biggest things, and the same with gacha games, is it's got to have that wow moment where you're just like, this is really fun. And I think Raid, funnily enough, their horrible tutorial is that wow moment. They ate Elhain. They ate her in the first 5 minutes. You're like, did they just kill one of the first 4? And then you get to pick, and then I picked Elhain because I'm like, she got eaten.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. So it was just, I think that moment was just like, it was a little comedic, and they had enough of a comedy kind of groove because I didn't see any of their big commercials. Obviously, everyone saw their ads, but their ads had nothing to do with the game back then. But I remember I was playing Walking Dead, and it was one of those freebies. You had to watch a little thing to get some free resources, and I saw it right, and that's how I played it. But it was just at the beginning, I thought it was fun, and then it let me go in there, and I was like, oh, I get to build up champions, and I just thought that was really going to interest me. And so it hooked me almost immediately into that. I get to customize my teams. I get to do this. I made so many mistakes in that beginning. I used legendary tomes on Elhain. I did all the wrong things.
Yeah.
but I had fun playing it. It was, yeah, I think that's what hooked me to Raid, was just that it was, you could see how much potential and variety there was right out the gate. And
obviously when you started playing, and when we started playing, it didn't have anywhere near the level of content that people would see now. If someone's only playing Raid at the moment, well, it's like a completely different game at that point. One of the things we've been asked about fairly regularly, actually, is how do we come out the gate and compete with something which has been around for so long, in terms of content. And one of the things I say is, well, I don't necessarily think you need as vast an array of content to make an enjoyable game. You just need, for the content that you're dropping with, to be engaging, and for you to still have that feeling of progression, and and those wow moments and that enjoyment factor. And I think if we do that, we can actually still kind of like live ops, slow burn drop content like any of these games do, and still be really relevant. But I'm curious how you feel about that, because you've played a number of these games now.
Yeah, it's kind of funny people would have that kind of feeling, because would they forget that Raid was just this brand new game that dropped in when Summoner's War, was it Summoner's Wars? Is that the one?
Summoner's War, yeah, really established, like 5 years
established, right? And not to mention several Asian market themed, people were playing them, like Netmarble, who's doing King Arthur, had Seven Deadly Sins Japan version for years before they did the English version, and I think that was around the same time. So Raid broke through with, think of the beginning content there. It was nothing. To the point where we're like, my God, we need content because we're having fun. We are progressing. But yeah, so I would think that just making sure you're feeling a sense of progression, you're feeling a sense of accomplishment. I think the accomplishment aspect, that moment when you can go and you can finally beat 12-3 or 12-2 or one of the 12s, because that's usually where that, or 11 actually, because it's, the 11 was the worst because it was a lot of force affinity, and your starting champion was always magic affinity. So,
well, I don't know if any of you were playing, but 11 was actually the stage to farm when I started playing, because everybody was trying to max out Executioner.
Well, when I did start playing, so I started to absorb content, which is what I do. So if I decide I'm going to deep dive into a game, I'm like, right, let me just try and understand as much about this game as I can. Let me try. Certainly at that point, I guess games before that, it wasn't as readily available, but we're getting into that age of now content and guides and that type of stuff. So I was like spam watching content, and I kept finding all of this. You should do Executioner now. He's such a great champ. But I don't know if he was changed or nerfed or whatever, but he wasn't the same champion when I started playing. And it was, I don't think I started playing that long after you, Brad, but I was just like, I don't know why everyone's going on about this fella. Like, he's not up to it. So yeah, it was like a red herring.
Yeah, they balanced him about 5 months in. They nerfed him.
Oh, did they? Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, he was already nerfed. And a lot of people, whatever original clan I had gone into by luck, because at the beginning, you're just like, oh, join a clan? Okay. Like, I didn't think of who. They said, yeah, don't bother with Executioner. Don't bother. And I think it was, I was watching Incredible
John. Yeah.
Incredible John. I think it was one of his videos that said, don't do this. Stick with your, like that show's over. Stick with your starter. And I think that was a good help.
Yeah, good take.
Well,
yeah.
I have a funny story about Incredible John. It was back then, there was like 4 content creators. And so he asked me for a collab. And he was like, oh, we'll do it live. Like, come on my stream. We'll do it live and we'll review some legendaries. And he pulls up a legendary. We talk about it for like 5 minutes. Goes to the next legendary. We talk about it for like 5 minutes. We get about 15 legendaries in, and it's like an hour and a half. I'm like, are we going to go through every single... There's 80 legendaries. Am I going to be here for 12 hours? I was like, hey, man, it's been fun, but I got to go. That was one of my first raid collabs. I was like, I didn't know we're going through every single one for, 8 hours.
Like full detail, yeah. Nice.
That's funny. Yeah, actually, I can still remember... I've probably collabed with Brad and maybe John J Gigs. Probably the 2 that I've collabed the most with. But I can remember the one back in the early days of Void legendaries, or Voids just being so worthy, and we got the most meme thumbnail out of it because I absolutely I don't even think I pulled you a good epic. Like it was 54 and it was 0 for 54.
I'll have to
And,
find that thumbnail for the editing this
oh
video.
my god. Yeah, that was pretty fun.
But getting back to kind of, I want to bounce this off of you. From my perspective, what kind of hooked me with Raid was there was that constant, minuscule progression. It's like I get to a place in the campaign and I fail, but it's like if I just get 1% stronger, I can retry. So I'd go back to the Bastion, spend a couple XP brews on my starter. It's like, well, wait a minute, now let me go try this again, and then I would beat it, and that feels good. It's like, okay, I lost, I went back, I got just a little bit stronger, and now I'm able to push again. Okay, now I beat 4 or 5 more stages. I go back, and by then I have 20 mystery shards. Oh, okay, like I got that constant minute progression through normal kind of kept me coming back. It's like I just need to get a little bit stronger, upgrade one piece, and I might be able to beat that stage. So I think giving the player, I don't know if you agree with that or disagree with that, but giving that player the avenue to kind of slowly progress, kind of
you
that first
have to
playthrough.
have you have to have fail points. You have to. I don't think it makes sense. Now maybe we're different, but I think that if you can just breeze through something, it's not going to be fun. And you see that among these, you see these huge spenders in Raid, and they come and go because they consume with money, and then they finish the game too early, and then they get bored, and then they leave. Man, that's probably, you know, Raid's timetable of bringing new content and champions in the game really ramped up, probably because they were like, oh no, we got to keep these guys happy with at least new champions.
Now, would
And
that be why? Would that be why Raid, they limit the amount of void shards you can buy? Remember, like, like in the main shop, you can do 5 void offers, and then you gotta wait a month. And you can't just buy infinite void shards. You gotta wait for a new offer. So maybe they're trying to not let you just, you know, if you're a big spender, they don't want you to just collect everything you want in 1 week. They want you to keep kind of playing, maybe.
I would probably think so. In that first year, even their offers were pretty scarce on the void side. Now you still get, you know, they get the $100 pack all the time, and you could probably get a good couple hundred. But back then, I don't think. Certainly, buying was tough, but even free to play was, you know, was scarce. I was just gonna say, thinking, you know, having that real, because the moment of progression, feeling that success, you have to struggle. Like that's not just games. That's like watch any movie that's in the world. There's a point when your main character fails, and usually fails miserably, and something happens. A friend dies. A main, you know, he feels like a failure, and then he picks himself up and goes. And it's that mindset that we have that makes a good story, that makes us play, is that very moment when you do succeed.
Yeah, this is one of those things as well. So there's a lot of people that think that they want, yeah, let's take summoning. They think they want really improved odds from any other game that exists today because they want to collect the shiny toys as quickly as possible. I've played games like that, and they get boring extremely fast. You know, they think they want, when a new piece of content drops today, they think tomorrow they should have been able to beat it already in full. And again, that gets boring really fast. So, like you say, I'm a big believer of there being some challenging, almost like Brad was saying, small progression. Then you kind of hit a wall, and you need to actively go and either improve your squad, or go and farm something else to improve your gear, or whatever it is. Like you basically need to come away from that, make some improvements, and then come back, and then you've got this. Then you're getting over a hurdle, and that feels good. That's a feel good moment. So I think there's and again, it's these fine balances, right? Because PoE 2 just came out this week, and people can't beat. I've not played the game yet, honestly, but I've seen a lot of info about it. People are struggling to beat some of the early level bosses. And I think, Brad, you did a video on it actually, saying that the sort of end of the first campaign or something, where there's a boss, it's almost as hard as the hardest bosses, in other games. So, we can't be on that scope, because you do want to retain players. You want people to enjoy the game. But there has to be a certain level of difficulty in a game. Otherwise, it's just, as I say, it just gets dull. And we definitely don't want to be there.
What Simon was talking about, I even found myself falling into that trap. Like when Raid would release the Doom Tower, and I found myself getting very frustrated, like when I couldn't beat one of the bosses, because I would be like, if I can't do this, I've spent $20,000, I've been playing for 5 years, I should be able to breeze through this content. What the hell is Plarium doing? Like, if I can't do
Yeah.
this, how the hell is a new player going to do this? But you're right. You do have to give me that challenge, because then when I do beat Bommel, I'm like, okay, I achieved something here. Whereas if I would have just auto-clicked it first run, I would get bored.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think one of the issues with the way that was done, and don't get me wrong, Doom Tower is brilliant content, right? But one of the issues with the way that was done is they've released content, but they've not given you tools within the new release to ramp up to beat it, right? So if I think back to my World of Warcraft days, which I played World of Warcraft for years on end, they would have a big new piece of content, and they actually did it in a different system. They had basically almost like a reset system where the next thing you beat starts to upgrade all your gear, so that you're constantly reprogressing gear, and it's almost like the old stuff you had was kind of obsolete because you've now got new content to farm and that type of stuff. So this game doesn't really play in the same way, or doesn't do well to play in the same way. But I do think if you're going to launch a tower of new content, then beating the first boss should help you to get some tools for further bosses in that tower or something like that. There needs to be something within the new content that helps you maneuver through it, so that you feel like, okay, well, I could go back and farm boss 1 for a bit longer to help me with, say, boss 3 or whatever it is,
Yeah. And I think one thing that Watcher does very well is they bring new champions out with mechanics that don't make sense in the time, and then they release content, and you're like, oh, so like Edith was terrible. Everyone's like, oh, I don't want Edith. She's terrible. She does nothing. She's a tank. Tanks are a dime a dozen, and she's got this mechanic that pushes. Why would you ever want to push away an enemy so you can't hit them? Oh, and then all of a sudden, Gear Raid 1 dropped, where you have to push. The best strategy is to push the enemy away because they're a time bomb that blows everyone up. You're like, oh, and suddenly Edith became the best in class.
Best in class,
that.
yeah.
And it's and that's just one of probably 10 good examples in Watcher. The only downfall of Watcher, and I guess this might be veering off to a different topic, is the meta is so narrow that it becomes less fun. And from a content creator perspective, I struggle making videos on it, because with Raid, how many ways are there to beat the guild boss? Even from in year 1, you had 50 champions that you could piece together different strategies. Are you using counterattack? Are you using unkillable? Are you using block damage? Are you just beefing up shields? Like, there's so many ways to beat that boss. You could do 100 videos and never go through all the combinations. Here, it's like, okay, well, I need Edith. There's my video. And now what do? You're done. So, I mean, bring it back to GODFORGE. My biggest ask from a player is that there has to be a reason to play something you've already beaten. And you think of, I can do it faster and quicker, and that's another, the tower defense. The monsters are timed, so you can't do it faster.
Yeah, that was one of my frustrations with Watcher, actually, is that I didn't feel like, once I've done it, even if I saw someone do a really cool strat, I'm like, oh, I can already do it. And I can't do it any quicker because that's not in my power. So we definitely are angling for content which so it's not necessarily quicker in everything, but it's better. Like, you can find better strategies to either farm more or farm faster, or and that definitely in the kind of boss designs that we're fleshing out, that's really important.
Good.
Yeah, and obviously making them interesting and stuff as well. But yeah,
especially for the big boss. Like, I always go back to guild boss because it was such an important thing, and it's where the best resources are in both Watcher and in Raid. Beating that guild boss, the guild boss, and then hitting that top chest, and then, but even when you hit that top chest, there was something so fun about it in its base that you would make, oh wow, I got Demetha. Well, I had a top chest team
definitely
4 years ago, but then, oh, I want to try the Demetha. Oh, what, Valkyrie? You can just do enough shields that you can just live. Oh, that'll be fun, and you just do it. And getting sub 1 minute speed runs on Dragon and all the rest of them. That was a big proponent of enjoying the game, is going back and tinkering. So I think that's something
interestingly.
That
so I don't know how much you know about our mastery system right now. Have you seen any of the content? It's been quite sparse, honestly, but have you seen any content about the masteries that we're looking to do?
Specifically, no.
No. So what we want to do is basically to gain masteries, you have to master content within the game. And then once you've earned a mastery, you can use it on any of your heroes. So, so for example, let's say you can beat Guild Boss and you get the maximum chest every day. But there might be a mastery that says, well, if you achieve this much damage, then actually you unlock this new mastery, which, I don't know, gives your nukers ignore defense or whatever it is, you know, whatever the mechanic is. But basically it's something that it's longer term goals. So short term goals, which might just be, okay, well, I've managed to get the maximum chest, and that got me this kind of like cool mastery that I can use anywhere. But then there's also these longer term goals, which you can set yourself the challenge of, to say, right, actually, I really want to be able to beat this dungeon in this much time, or achieve this much damage against this enemy, or all these different fun things, which again, we can extend over time as well with content drops as we think of more fun things to do or to add, or as we progress as a game, we can say, well, actually, you know what, this is kind of obsolete content now, but we could make some really fun masteries with, with the way the game has evolved, for people to still go back into that old content, but do it in a different way. And that way it just kind of gives a bit more development. But also, let's say you get this new hero on your account and you max them out, and then suddenly it's like, well, I could now put any of those mastery sets on that I've earned over time as soon as I've unlocked my masteries, So it's, I think it'll be quite fun, because there's one other element to it, which is kind of, at the moment, we're not sure about the name, but we're thinking Mayhem. And it's like masteries which at the start, when we launched the game, they won't even be detailed, and people will find these masteries as like basically Easter eggs. So more like community driven exploration type stuff.
Sure. I mean, yes, please. There you go. Yes, please. I'll take that. Some more. I'll take another bowl of that, because just there's so much content that's dead, and one way to do it. And I think the fear that Raid has, and I see the validity of that when I play Watcher, is if you can automatically skip stuff, it never incentivizes you to go back and play it again. So now, like, you got the first 3 dungeons in Watcher of Realms that I don't even play them anymore. So even though they've got 8 different things you can do, 8 main areas, they really don't. They have 2 or 1 or whatever the new, because all the old stuff is just auto. So if you can find excuses for people to go back in there, and that's why the Semra boss, the Guild Boss 2, has been so important in Watcher, because it's the first content I feel it's fun creating new content, and the threshold's 120, but now I got 186 and I'm aiming for that 200, even though it doesn't get me anything. I think that's so important, because you need to be able to, I mean, we'd all love to play the game in a half an hour, but from a developer point, no, you want people to play the game for 2-3 hours. You just want them to want to, not have to.
Well, that's the point. What you want is, you want for someone to think, I want to do that because that's going to be really fun, or that's going to make me feel like I've hit an achievement, or whatever it is. But it's not like I want to force you to do it because I need you to play for longer. So I want you to want to play the game, basically. And if you can't commit to playing the game today, because pretty much this genre attracts older guys generally, and people that are working, guys and girls, but generally guys. Honestly, it's like 95% or something. But it's guys that are at work, and they've got a certain amount of free time during the day, but then they might have some extra time in the evening or a weekend where they can actually say, no, I'm going to play this for hours today. But most days I'm playing it for like half an hour.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's probably the biggest positive from Watcher, is it literally gives you that where you can play it for 3 hours, but you can also play it for 30 minutes. That's I will be making a Christmas wish list video on Fateless on GODFORGE,
right? Okay,
in the near future, and that is one of the
I'd love to hear like a couple of the things that you definitely would want to either see in the game, or hope we achieve within the build. What's kind of front of mind for you?
The biggest thing for me is I want to always feel progression. Like, I always want to feel like something I did today, not the day that you're spending 30 minutes, right? But the day I'm sitting down, okay, GODFORGE, today we're going to have a little fun. I want to feel like I'm progressing somewhere. There's always somewhere I can challenge myself. It doesn't necessarily, and that's what I like about those other challenges, those masteries you can go for, which aren't necessarily the core needs of the game, but is pushing yourself, because I want that. I want more than one way to skin a cat, which is the weirdest phrase now that you say it out loud. Why am I skinning cats? That seems like a very mean thing.
It's got to be an old phrase, that one, right? It's,
Who's skinning cats?
Why are we doing that?
Why? You know who skins cats? Serial killers, you
Yeah.
psycho. But anyway, like I want to be able to go into any piece of content and not be pigeonholed into one or two champions. Now, does it have to be certain content? You can be like, yeah, honestly, without a legendary or crazy gear, you're not going to be able to do it. I'm fine with that. That's part of the progression. But I look at what frustrates me about Watcher of Realms is there's 5 champions I'm using in everything, and there's 30 champions that are unique to one area, and every piece of content is pretty narrow. Like Gear Raid 3, there's 2 ways to do it, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, so I have all these champions. I'm spending money. You want me to spend money on summoning, but now those champions that I've summoned better not just look cool. They better be useful. So yeah, more than one way to skin a cat. And then reason to go back. And I think that you've also, with the masteries included, reason to go back to old content. I want to be able to have times that I'm like, today we're going to tackle Gear Raid X, right? Stage X, and I'm gonna get that sub 1 minute, and I'm gonna break myself getting that, and that, or the guild boss or whatever. I think those are the 3 big things. It's funny, we talk about how it has to look good, and I think that's been a big focus. You guys really want to make sure that it's competing and even beating Raid. If it's in the ballpark, that's all you need. It can't look bad. Looking bad, you can look at what happened with Calibria. That's what looking bad looks like to me. It just never had that zip, and it became like, it's just not good enough. I had to force myself to play it because I just didn't like the look. So if the look is good, which it is, I mean, we've seen the content. I don't need it to look the best, maybe unique, but that's not my world. My world is that progression piece, that always being able to tinker old content, new content, pushing myself, those sort of things. I think that's, for me, is that's what kept me in Raid. It really.
I will say, and so great points. I think it kind of falls in line with what we're thinking in terms of the look. It's like I've seen a lot of games come and go where they didn't look good, and I think that was a decent reason for why they failed. And so my ethos right before we started this project was it needs to be in this ballpark. We need to be playing in the same sort of space for us to really have a chance to break out. Because even if you look at some of the anime games, they look good, but in a different way. Like Honkai Star Rail, I did a load of research on Honkai for GODFORGE, and in my head, I didn't think it looked that great. I actually did. I played it when it first came out, and I thought, it's not really got much going for it. But then when I went back and started to really deep dive, I was like, actually, it is slick. What they have done, the work they have done, is phenomenal. But it's just in a different style to what I would normally go for. Therefore, you know, in my brain, I was like, no, I don't really like the visual. The visual's brilliant. It's just in a different style. So yeah, so for us, that was like one of the things. But I think, talking to your point around, you know, not having a one size fits all for content. I really like the way when Raid first launched, it had these different puzzles. You know, you've got the core dungeons within Raid, outside of when you kind of like got stuck somewhere on campaign. They all had a very different challenge. You had to bring in different types of your champs to be able to deal with it. And you couldn't just brute force all of the dungeons with the same team, certainly not early on. As time goes on and power creep comes in, then those same early champions kind of can just brute force it, but certainly not at the start. You had to bring in specific mechanics to be able to deal with them. And I think when we're looking at boss designs, it's like, well, let's make sure that there's cool variety, and then
Absolutely.
make sure that the heroes have got variety in kits to be able to support with that, even if it's, you know, even if you need to be bringing in 2 rares, for example, rather than, we don't want to force people to have to bring in a team of legendaries. We just want for people to think, how do I overcome the challenge, rather than, you know, who's the strongest hero in the game that can do this.
Yeah. And also, I would say, when it comes to events and special, this is one of the worst things I think that Raid has. And when they get it right, it's like, oh, finally. Like, I think Hydra, a lot of people bitched about it, but they did the right thing. You had to attack it differently. And I think the problem with it is, like, think of the Siege, or whatever it is. That's what's called, right? Siege?
Yeah.
It's the same thing, just in a new shell. and
Just
you think
reskinned, yeah.
of Centranos. It's the same thing in a new shell. And though that kind of gets repetitive, I think that's one of the parts of Raid that really turned me off, is that every new piece of content was the same as the last piece of content, just with different. And they even in Centranos were like, oh, we'll even use the same bosses. We'll just put 2 of them.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
It was fun for the first little while, but it got stale really fast because it's no different than the campaign. It's no different than Dragon. It's no different than either you fight one piece and then move on to the next, or you fight 2 waves and then the main piece. And it was just, with events.
I will say, for me, sorry, yeah, talk about events in a second, but just on Siege, I actually think the person who came up with the design of Siege, they did a good job. Like, you've got these things which I can set as a defender, which makes my defense suddenly strong, which then the offense has then got to come and deal with. That's actually a fun concept, because defense has always been, in any PvP style, far weaker than offense. So actually suddenly the attacker's got to come in and think about what they're going to do. But the problem is they kind of locked it behind all these currencies, which meant that it took ages before anyone could experience that. And therefore, everyone's already turned off of the game mode before they get to experience the fun part of it. And, you know, that's like a bit of a flaw in that style of design. But again,
Absolutely.
like from the start, with myself and the design team, we've always said events need to feel like an event. And, you know, there needs to be a diverse roster of things that we can pull on, you know, whether it's a fusion or whether it's a world boss or whether it's, you know, something completely different. We need to make sure that we can just pick up different elements and make it feel like an event is kind of fresh. Maybe not every single one is unique, but just make it feel like if someone's playing over a 6-month window, then they're not going to just play the same event back to back to back to back, and honestly just feel bored of it.
Yeah. And I think to further that because you're right about Siege. Also, if the mechanic is ignored because brute strength is and how many times in Raid has it been like, forget this, just bring your
just
best,
use this,
just ramp them up.
Yeah.
And Siege is like that. Like there are those cool little things, and our clan hadn't when I left, we hadn't lost, so we were crushing it. We had all the resources, but am I better off just bringing my 4 absolutely ridiculous Galathier with Ultimate Death Knight, and like, you're not getting through this team? Or do I try to play those little tinker things, which may not bring and the reality was every time, just put your best 4, just bring those 4 in. They're not going to win. It's going to be painful. And that's what we did. So, and that's not the only one. I'm pretty sure, I'm trying to remember, there's a couple others where it came through and brute force just kind of ruined the mechanic. So that's always a big fear.
Hey, great insight, Capper. One thing I did want to make sure I get in there is, for a lot of our guests, we like to give them the opportunity to kind of shout out a hero or legend or myth that you personally would be like, you guys got to get them in the game because I'm going to want to collect them. So do you have a favorite kind of mythological?
Well, I mean, it's funny. When this was first starting, I was like, hey, Simon, this is my idea. And he was like, well, actually, that's our idea. We've got that, or IP, because it's before you had decided.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
So it's like, well, no, we've already got that. And I think, Brad, at one point I had mentioned that to you. By the way, this is your own employee. He was like, it's okay. Well, you guys are doing exactly what was okay to Brad a few years ago. So I just
I need a screenshot of this. And what are you talking about?
Well, I did the one where it was like, you take the different mythos. Like I had a story behind it that the Titans were coming back, and that all the gods had to band together to stop the Titans, and then you find out that one of the gods betrayed them all and has been breaking.
Yeah, but what is the context?
Titans.
Like, were you pitching this to me or something?
Yeah, well, a long time ago I was pitching it.
I don't even remember.
Like, yeah, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
You can ask,
when we were talking about IPs, actually, MadCapper messaged me and was like, look, I've actually got a really cool idea for this genre of game as well. And I was like, funny enough, that's exactly like my idea. I was like, if we don't end up going with an IP, this is exactly the type of thing that I'd already been talking to Sham and Dan about. Not exactly the same, but like really similar style. And I was like, damn. And actually, I remember saying to Sham at the time, I was like, it sounded like we'd just stolen his idea.
You sons of... Well, my lawyers will be in contact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, I mean,
Dabber
the
wants a
reality
2%
is
retainer.
yeah. I mean, it's a pretty. The reality is it's a smart base idea because you've got an almost limitless amount of non-copyrighted, immediately recognizable, and you pick the most important because everyone loves Japanese mythos. Everyone loves Thor. It's always been popular, and Odin and Asgard and stuff. So you're picking those ones. The one I would love to see, and that was one that when I was kind of fleshing out in my head with my idea, was like I really wanted to bring Native American culture into it because I've never seen a game be able to respectfully bring in Native American culture. So if you
Sure.
want one from me, I'd love to see how that would work. Ghost walkers and shamans and that sort of, and just really delving in because they actually have a pretty strong and diverse, like the Cherokee were different than
Yeah.
than the
It-
Siksika and all these.
You know what's interesting? Like when we were figuring out our first 10 factions that we wanted to do, we actually spoke a little bit about Native American. And my view at the time was I don't feel like there's as much depth as some of the other factions. But it's funny because a lot of people have mentioned this. There's a lot of people that have been commenting this would be a great faction. And the more you dive into it, you're like, actually, there's a really good chance this is our 11th faction, honestly. Like, a bit further down the line, but it's a really good chance.
Absolutely.
There's so many people that are keen for it. So,
I mean, have we publicly said the 10 factions, all 10 of them?
yeah, the 10 and 10 are
Okay.
out there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
So,
said
yeah,
all
so-
10? What did I
think-
missed that one.
Yeah, we have had all 10 out there. I think, yeah, there's websites publishing it now. It's everywhere. I don't know if we were meant to say the 10, but we've definitely had it out there. Yeah. Yeah. But
I
yeah,
think
so
everyone, I was just to say, a lot of the content creators, it's really funny. You have created this wave, I think, that because I remember playing other games and I didn't find like when I first get into the gacha, there's no Walking Dead resource compendium site.
sure.
But there is hellhades.com. And so now everyone's like, oh, new game? I'm registering
Yeah,
17 different names because in case I can get that one that goes through. And yeah, it's I think the resource that's Raid's strength. And if you can lean into that, I think one of the best things that Plarium did, and when they don't do it right, it's one of the worst things they do, is not leaning into the community and just letting community have access to resource, right? Like Deadwood Jedi's site created so many people doing so many things, and Hellhades just, I was still using like an end game player who knows everything. I just, oh man, what's the stage of Hydra? What do I need now? Oh, go down
Yes.
to the stages tool and go.
So do
okay,
I. I still
right,
use it
yeah.
now. Yeah, definitely.
So it just makes it so easy, and it's kind of cool seeing that pop up, and there's people trying to jockey their way in.
Mm. It
and
is
it's probably
cool.
gonna be more
I must
variety.
admit, that's one of the really rewarding parts of this for me. I watch near enough all of the videos of people doing content on GODFORGE, good or bad, whatever it is. I watch it because I'm like, I feel honored almost that people are already so keen on what we're doing and have that kind of interest already in what we're trying to do. So yeah, it's fun. I mean, sometimes you watch Orlando, your recent video, I was like, it's kind of right. It's kind of right about this thing. We need to tidy this up. And, there's bits that are not quite there, but it's still cool that you're interested enough to give that opinion, and yeah, it's a weird experience, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, to answer your question from 5 minutes ago, Native American.
Okay. Is there a specific one? Have you got one that you would call out?
No, I think it's because I was looking through, and there are some areas where it's not that it's not there's no depth. It's that the depth hasn't been written. So there's some where they don't really know. But if you take an amalgamation of several different cultures within the Native American tribe, you can really get some. And maybe that's the way you do it, is like their need to band together. The 11th faction, these tribes are getting whatever the story, and then to band together. I mean, the great thing about this genre is the story doesn't need to be deep, just has to be there. And for those few that love it, it has to make sense. You can't just be like, well, and then they all got together, went into the peace tent and became friends. There's got to be a way. But yeah, I think just being able to bring those different cultures together, including the Inuit, which of course being Canadian, that's a big part of our world, and they're so uniquely different than anything of the rest of that the Native American culture. So
All right, cool.
Well, if we
Yeah,
if we
nice.
end up having a peace tent in the town, we'll give you credit for that.
We call it the
Capper.
Kappa Peace Tent. Yeah.
Capper piece.
Hey, yeah, no, thanks, Capper. Thanks for taking the time to join us. This has been a blast, and we will link to MadCapper's channel down below to go check out his stuff. Are you gonna be covering GODFORGE on the main channel?
I
there,
will.
Capper?
Absolutely. That is the
There you
Rage
go.
channel is a placeholder until GODFORGE, until I get into that early access beta, Simon. Early
coming. It's coming.
access beta.
Yep, there you
It's
go. Well,
coming.
there, great channel to keep tabs on there with Cappers that we'll link down below. We'll also put the things like Discord and all that if you want to pop in and give your opinions on some of the stuff that we're doing over there. And Simon's always leaking stuff and reading the input as well. So, hey, Simon, cheers. Capper, thanks for
you so
joining
much.
us. And we will see you all
Thanks a lot.
soon in the next Fateless podcast episode. Later.